Welcome back, folks. I am, as we speak, drawing. This is fun. Madison, the associate producer, jumped off the phones, and she brought me in a Sharpie. And, you know, I've wanted to do this for a while. This is the ugliest spider web you've ever seen in your life. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do full disclaimer on there on what I'm drawing here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump out of order, Joe. I'm going to get to the chat room in a minute. But I'm hot on this. Our 2 phone calls today have really been about relationships and connections. And so I attempted to draw a spider web. And, Joe, what it looks like is a severely bloodshot eye is what I think this is going to look like. Let's have some fun with this. Nathan, which camera? Let's go close. Okay, so I want everybody to kind of look at this. Look at this. Oh, gosh. Isn't that fantastic? Now, that's my spider web. I know it looks like somebody's been up for 36 hours. But you see, that's essentially my version of a web, okay? It works, okay? Having some fun with it. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Okay, I'm gonna keep drawing on that. All right?
Well, at least you got the red out.
Yeah, I did get the red out. Okay, but here's what I want to do. So let me give some quick context. I wrote about this in my best-selling book, The Proximity Principle, where it's just like, here's how to make connections. Connections are everything. Opportunity comes to us from who we know and who they know. And so we're gonna have fun with that. So listen. There's your first nugget of notes. It's not just about who you know; it's who they know. So think about that for a second. It's not just about who you know. Let's say you know 200 people. It's about who those 200 people know, okay? So that's where the web of connections comes from. By the way, it's not a phrase I created. This is a well-known phrase used in psychology and sociology circles. All right, let's first talk about how powerful a spider web is and why I love the web analogy. Joe, I did some research on this in anticipation of today's teaching. And this is just a fun little nugget. Did you know that the silk that a spider spins, if you will, they use, is smaller in circumference than a hair on our head?
Knew that.
Did you really? So if you pull a hair out of your head, and Joe, don't do that because you don't have as many as I do, so you need to save yours.
You're right.
You pull a hair out of your head and you look at that and you go, oh my gosh, a spider web is thinner than the hair on my head. But while it is thinner than the hair on our head, it is as strong, listen to this, pound for pound, as steel. Pound for pound. So understand in the context, pound for pound, it's as strong as steel. So, we all love Spider-Man. There's been about 80 versions of Spider-Man in my lifetime. And we see Spider-Man swinging from building to building, and it's like this thick cord. Well, the reality is it's not that thick, but it is that strong. So why am I talking about this? Because the spider uses that silk and puts a web together in my really awful drawing, just from piece to piece to piece. And what does it become? It becomes this circular trap for bugs to get stuck in, and the spider takes their sweet time crawling up the web and eating the poor bug. It also makes for a wonderful freak out for all of us who've ever late one night or early one morning walked face first into a web. You know what I'm talking about? Is there anything funnier than watching somebody walk along and they start doing this number? And they're freaking out. You know they're full of spider web to the face. Now, the strength of the silk is the metaphor. The strength of your web of connections. Again, my terrible drawing, but I'm going to have some fun with this, okay? So this inner circle, I'm drawing this really thick right here. Okay, this inner circle, where are we at, Nathan? I'm coming back to you. Okay, that inner circle, the dark inner circle, we're talking about close, intimate relationships, all right? So those would be friends, very close friends, and family members, okay? And when we get outside of that, what all is on the outside web as we kind of come from that center? Well, those would be coworkers, current coworkers. They know a lot of people. You're in a place you want to leave. If you trust them, and some you can, well, they've got relationships. So they would be a coworker. We could say people that you went to college with that you still associate with. You're not super close with, but you still associate with them on social media and you have a good relationship with them. Okay. Then we could also talk about your kids' network. So the parents of your kids' friends, school, sporting activities, all of those things. Again, that's kind of, we're getting outside of that close inner circle. And so all of those relationships would be considered acquaintances. And we know from sociology research, Mark Granovetter, I talked about this in my #1 best-selling book, The Proximity Principle, most people get jobs through their acquaintances. So many of us are looking at, well, I only know 12 people really well. Well, how many people do you know? Forget the really well. Because here's what we know. The human spirit wants to help others. And so if you think about your social media connections, your acquaintances, again, your friends, friends of friends, parents of your kids' friends, all of a sudden, I can pretty much get just about anybody to about 100 people, probably closer to 200, 250. If you throw in social, maybe you're getting closer to 500. Now, how many people do you think each of those 500 connections knows? Well, let's just say they know 500 or 200. You can do the math however you want to. Even the most cynical among you go, okay, I'll go with the 100 or the 200 number. Well, when we begin to look diligently, this is when opportunities present themselves. And so I'll give you a story from my journey on how this works. And Joe knows this story. I was in a desperate situation, much like our caller earlier. Letitia, where she called up, she said, Ken, I've applied. I haven't heard back in a month. I'm trying to find a phone number. I'm just going to call somebody up and tell them how great I am. Well, I told her lovingly, that's not going to happen. But I did the same thing when I tried to get into radio. Here I am in Atlanta, and I was in a really desperate place. And I was in a season where I was like, okay, I got to make something happen. So I started calling 3 or 4 different radio stations, cold call, leaving voicemails, emailing the program directors. Well, folks, that just doesn't work. But I did it because I think sometimes we all just go, okay, I'm just going to put myself out there and hopefully something happens. Well, guess what? It's a recipe for discouragement. And it didn't work. So I'm sitting in my basement office one day after not getting anything, crickets. Can't catch any opportunity. Been calling, been emailing, can't get anything. And I sit down and I want to explain this web of connections a little bit more detail because here's what I did. I actually created a spreadsheet on my computer and I began to look at all of my Outlook contacts. And as I would go through and I went A to Z, it took me about 2 hours. But as I went A to Z, I basically said yes or no. Meaning, I feel like I could reach out to them, or I feel like, I'm not going to reach out to them. But I basically put just about everybody on the list. And then I went to tiers of, well, how well do I know them? I don't know them at all. How long has it been since I've reached out to them? And I just did kind of a cataloging of everybody in my Outlook or my phone. And I was just beginning to try to organize them. Okay, this would be my first tier, second tier, third tier. Could I talk to somebody else who would then maybe reintroduce me there? But I was going, who knows somebody in radio? And Joe, I'm sitting there in my office. I think you know this story.
I think I've heard it.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there and I see under the C's, Elizabeth Carswell. And I go, how do I know her? Oh, yeah. I had lunch with her and her business partner. They had a nonprofit. And I had lunch with them. And I did it as a favor for another friend. Okay, that's how I know her. Huh. Does she, and it hit me. I remember when we were having lunch, she told me that her family owned a local talk radio show, a station. But at the time, Joe, I wasn't thinking about radio. I was kind of in the sports TV. And so it stuck in my head, but it wasn't something I acted on. This was 6-8 months. And folks, as I'm sitting there and I'm going, Elizabeth, okay, all right. And I put her on the list of people that I should reach out to right away, first here. Well, as the story goes, and Joe knows this, I did reach out to her, sent her an email. I had done her a favor. We walked away from that lunch. She felt like I helped her, gave her a lot of great ideas and some great relationships and connections. And so when I reached back out, I said, hey, listen, hope everything's going well. Would love to hop on the phone with you soon. She said, sure. So within an hour, I was on the phone with her. And I said, hey, and we did small talk. How's everything going? We talked about the things we talked about, and I said, hey, listen, here's why I called. Didn't you tell me in the lunch that your family owned a talk radio station somewhere in the area? And she goes, yeah, Jacobs Media. That's my brother. I'm an owner as well. Our dad started it in Gainesville. We've got three stations, but it's the Jacobs Media company. And it's right up in Gainesville, about 35 minutes from here. I said, that's what I thought. So I said, listen, I'm not asking you to do something you're not comfortable doing. But if you're comfortable, I've been really thinking about getting my way on Saturdays and just seeing if I can do radio and make radio happen. And I'm willing to pay. I understand how it kind of goes. I've called the station program director 1 million times. I've emailed, no response. Would you be willing to get me a meeting with your brother? She said, are you kidding me? Done deal. He'll do it. I go, you got to be kidding me. She goes, no, we'll make it happen. And within a week, I was in Jacobs Media offices meeting with Jay Jacobs and his wife, Anna, who own and operate the stations. And it couldn't have gone any better. And for months, I had tried to get any kind of conversation there as long as other radio stations. And by going back into my web of connections and sitting for 2 hours doing a catalog of who do I know, who could I call, I remembered something. And because I had done a favor for somebody, I called him back and said, would you do a favor for me? And the answer was, of course. And I will tell you that I sit here today for a lot of reasons and a lot of help and God's blessing on my life, and a lot of people help me out. But I sit here today largely because Elizabeth Carswell set up a meeting for me with her brother. It's that simple. Now, I didn't plan to teach on this part, but let me go back. There was a point where a mutual friend of Elizabeth and I said, I think Elizabeth needs your help and advice on sponsorships and things of that nature. And that's what your company does, and you're good at it. And she's a really good friend of mine. Would you do me a favor and have lunch with her and her partner to help them? And I said, yes. Why? Because of the mutual relationship. I did a favor for one friend, a favor for Elizabeth, that she returned the favor to me later when I least expected that she could be the person, but because I got back into my web of connections and I remembered it, and then I had enough guts to ask her, and I had already done her a favor. I had added value to her. She got me the meeting, and I got to tell you, Joe, you and I have never talked about this part of it, but I got to believe that the meeting went so well with Jay and Anna because of what Elizabeth must have said to them before I ever showed up. Because of the value that I had added to her, and we had had a very good meeting, and I had really helped her out. So she's going, hey, this guy, sharp guy, runs a company, he helped me out, did me some solids. All that's happening before I ever walk in the room. So they think, well, he's a nice guy, he's not a wingnut, all those things. So I want you to understand that even in these moments right now where some of you are looking for the connection, don't stop looking to help other people. The law of reciprocity, right? When Zig Ziglar taught me this through a book years and years ago. You help other people get what they want in life, you'll get what you want. And that story from my journey, which was the foundational moment in me getting into radio. Number one, I helped somebody else and I remembered it and I had the guts to ask, and she returned the favor. But it is the law of reciprocity coming to meet the web of connections. And you've helped a lot of people. If you haven't, start helping people now. Not for the selfish reason of, I'm going to get a guaranteed connection. You don't know that. But I can tell you this. You start helping a bunch of people and you go back to those people and ask them for help, guess what they're going to do? They're going to help you, and they'll help you make a connection. So let's not overcomplicate this. But again, folks, I went through every contact I had, social media plus my Outlook and everything, and I began to catalog who would I contact, and I put them on this crude web. Here's my first, that inner layer, and then here's the next level, and then here's the outer edges of the web. And can I tell you that Elizabeth Carswell sat on the very outer edge, but I just happened to remember an important detail, which led to a breakthrough for me. So there's that crude drawing, but you need to get out your pencil and paper and draw your web and start to put real names in there and start to connect, because your breakthrough is on the other side of a connection.